You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Hey folks, Brian Nichols here from The Brian Nichols Show. Are you tired of partisan politics? Do you want to hear the news without that media narrative? Do you want to be more well-rounded as a person? Or how about this? Do you want to get to know and learn from noted entrepreneurs, elected officials, C-level executives, economists, and more? Well, how about this? Look no further. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show. Again, I'm your host, Brian Nichols. Go ahead and learn more at briannicholsshow.com.
Okay, so hear me out. You like getting cash back for the normal stuff you buy throughout your week, right? Of course you do. Check out the Dosh app. That's D-O-S-H, Dosh. Dosh is available at the App Store and Google Play Store and securely connects to your credit or debit card. From there, every time you use those cards, Dosh searches for available offers. Once it finds one, Dosh automatically redeems the offer and converts it into cold, hard cash. Muchos dineros, brother? Then deposits that directly into your Dosh wallet. Click the link to download and join Dosh today and get $5 just for joining. This link is exclusively in the show notes of this episode. So, show notes, special link, Dosh, $5 cash. Start on the path to quick and easy cash back on the things you love today.
Hey everybody, check out the Break the Bell podcast, where we believe your voice is your most powerful weapon. We're a weekly dose of our take on what's going on in the world, mixed with a side of history. Find us wherever podcasts are found or on social media handle at Break the Bell Pod. And most importantly, never stop talking.
Prepare yourself. You're on the run with Remso W. Martinez.
It's been an interesting year, to say the least. I think I preface every episode with this now, but we live in interesting times. You know, dogs living with cats, men fighting tigers, murder hornets, fire tornadoes. I mean, it's an interesting time to be alive. I don't think we've ever seen a time like this. But at the same time, I also have to say I've never seen an election like this. And by that, I mean it's largely underperforming, lackluster, boring, dare I say. I've never been less enthusiastic for anything like this in my life. But when it comes to the actual issues we're talking about, when it comes to the actual policies people are wanting to go ahead and throw out there, they've been kind of lagging. I don't think there's any singular thing that's actually captivated most of the country. You've got the coastal elites talking about think tank issues that don't connect to anyone, and you've got the rest of America sitting silent, hoping that somebody will actually give them their say. But when it comes to one of the issues closest and dearest to my heart, the Second Amendment, I think this has actually been a pretty good year. It seems like at the beginning of 2020, especially here in my home of Virginia, the Commonwealth, the mother of all states, we all thought that we were going to lead the way for the East Coast expansion of California-style gun control. Now it seems like in the wake of Black Lives Matter and everything else, with the left suddenly deciding, you know, maybe it's good for me to own a gun if I think all the fascists have them. It seems like this is the one thing that most Americans are now starting to you know, either get behind or at least stay silent about. The one thing I do have to thank Corona for is the fact that with all the public schools closed, there have been no school shootings. So basically, that has also helped. But there are many ways to look at this, and the big question now is the gun control debate over? We've got entrepreneur and advocate Kerry Sloan on today. Kerry, thank you so much for calling in. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So, you know, you must be smiling when you see these bands of crazy leftists, you know, going out in their black outfits with their, you know, fingers on the trigger because they've got poor self-control, gun control over their own firearms. What do you think of everything that's been going on when it comes to this? Because for the most part, this was going to be a very gun control specific election like maybe 7 months ago. Now it seems like everyone's just been like, it's okay if we're all pointing at each other.
Well, yeah, I think it's still, you know, being entrenched in the gun industry and community itself is, we talk about it still a lot. It's still relevant, especially as I know, Remso, you know that, you know, Kamala is my best friend.
Absolutely.
And,
BFFs.
she's after I confronted her, she and I became, we're tight. But and Joe, and talking about bringing in, Beta O'Rourke and all of these things. So, we still keep our eye on that. What is interesting to see is, I think it's great that people are getting armed, because I'm an absolutionist. I've taken a lot of heat, honestly, in the industry from people, because I even support, am not a fan of Antifa. I've been personally affected and lost people because of Antifa. So I'm not a fan, yet I still defend their right to be able to bear arms in self-defense. Let me repeat that. In self-defense. So I've taken a little bit of heat in that respect. The minute you go on the offense, it's a different story. But I believe that everybody has that right. I also believe that once, if you're a felon, you get to, once you've completed your sentence, you get to have your gun rights back. So I'm all about this ACB nomination. But I think when we're looking at this as a whole, I think it's great that there are so many people that are understanding the importance of being able to defend yourself, because the cops are not going to come. That being said, I think that, particularly in the gun industry, letting go of that, thinking that it's all going to be okay because everybody owns guns now, is incredibly short-sighted. If we in the industry are not continuing to actively do outreach and providing education, you're just going to end up with a bunch of people that are poorly trained and not using or not using their firearms at all. And I think once Trump gets reelected, because I have a really hard time believing that somebody with dementia is going to get elected unless the cheating is so bad. But I just don't see it happening.
I genuinely don't believe there's been a single on the fence voter since 2016. I think pretty much everyone has figured out, what they were going to do come 2020. Yeah. But the one thing that I've noticed, and correct me if you think I'm wrong with this, I've never seen, and I was a Clinton baby. And I remember the Bush years. I remember the Obama years. I don't remember a large portion of the political opposition saying, I'm going to walk away, saying that this party no longer represents me. I've only seen former Democrats do that for Trump. And I think that's a large contingent that the media has, blatantly ignored. I think that's a fact by now, that when you look at the Brandon Struckas and the Joy Villas of the world, they get ultimately ignored every time, or they're just blatantly attacked, and people are trying to discredit them for everything else. I genuinely don't believe that anyone, even Democrats, because what I tell people is, don't listen to what Democrats say to Republicans if you want to know what they actually believe. Listen to what Democrats say to each other. And no one is confident in Joe Biden, especially when he picked Kamala.
Oh, I would agree with you. And, and I've never been, she said you were a Clinton baby. I just have a really good Botox guy. So I'm quite a bit older. And that was actually my first election, was 92, when I got to vote in 92. And I voted for Ross Perot. And I've never been a two-party voter. And I don't, at this point, you say on the fence, and I'm not on the fence in terms of Republican or Democrat, but I'm not a fan of Joe Jorgensen. And I hate the fact that the Libertarians are even pulling out then you're not a feminist card, because they picked a woman who's actually, just because she's a woman doesn't mean crap. And,
they've turned full identity politics.
They sure have. And that pisses me off too. So, because I was a Gary Johnson voter in the last election, but they've gone, they picked a woman because she's a woman. And and I'm not saying, she is a very bright lady, but I don't think she has any clue what she's getting herself into in politics. She was polling in the bottom of the barrel with her own party, and was getting annihilated in their own inter-party debates, for the nominations. So
she's got a push-play problem.
Absolutely.
She's kind of all over the place. And I give her credit. She was Harry Brown's VP back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. But where was she the past 20 years?
Right. No, exactly.
What is she doing?
Exactly. And they need to bring her out. So I'm very much at do I go that third party again? Or, because for me, it's a moral and political statement. I live in Washington State, so it's not like it's I hate to say it, but it really, in the national election, it doesn't have too much of an effect, because we go 90, I think we went 97, 98%, Democrat last in 2016. But, of course, in your states is where it really matters anyway. But, but Trump is, my husband is like, nah, I'm on the MAGA train. Like and it's not so much because of Trump per se, it's how off the rail the other ones are.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people this. I did not vote for him in 2016. I didn't. Yeah. But when you look at everything that's going on right now, what really was kind of a decision point for me was one, it was the Kavanaugh hearings. Second, it was what they did to Mike Flynn. Third, it was impeachment. And fourth was when you had that liberal Democrat couple, the lawyers from Missouri, the McCloskeys. Yeah. When you see Battle Ken leave his martini to grab his AR to defend his private property, you have people trying to destroy their lives.
Yep.
I was partially, disappointed with the Amy Coney Barrett appointment. I think it should have been Ken McCloskey. I think that would have been the ultimate finger. But I think Amy's going to be great.
I can buy that. I'd buy that. As bizarre as the world is. I don't know the McCloskeys personally, but I have a friend that is friends with like 7 degrees of separation, whatever it is, right?
6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was just kind of weird. So the interesting thing about that, and this goes back into what's really important with gun rights, I think, is that we focus so much on the federal level, but we lose sight of what's really happening in the states. And I've been saying for years, I got thrown into advocacy 2 years ago with this when I spoke out against a law here in Washington State, which now I am suing the state over with Gun Owners of America. But they're using the 10th Amendment to take away our Second Amendment. So while people completely obsess at the federal level, they're quietly and behind the scenes working the systems. And, as we saw in Virginia is a great example, right? Where everything shut down, they got distracted and he turned around and passed some of those bills that got shut down because 40,000 people showed up. So when the McCloskey thing happened, this was, and it was frustrating for me as an advocate that understands policy, right? It's not just shall not be infringed, and that makes my skin cringe. Like, yes, spoiler alert, gun world, we know, right? We're very clear that we know what it says, right? So, but what blows my mind is how little policy they know, and what blows my mind even more is how little they know about states' rights and the power they've got with that. And the McCloskeys, the real thing that pissed me off with the McCloskey thing is when this DA went after them, knowing that legally they did nothing wrong, right? So Missouri is a castle doctrine state, but in Missouri, they specifically have mentioned in where they have that legislation written that it also doesn't just cover inside your house, because a lot of castle doctrine states cover just your property in your home. But in Missouri, it covers your property as well, all of the property you own. So yes, let's be clear, their handling of their firearms was a little bit, I wouldn't say criminal, but embarrassing. And it sounds like they've definitely stepped up and taken some training, which is wonderful. That being said, legally speaking, they did nothing wrong. And this is like a very, very clear example. In fact, I've become a firearms trainer recently, and I use this in my classes. The fact that they went after her just shows, or the DA went after her, shows you that it is especially for district attorneys in larger cities, it is a political move. And they did that. She did that to try to punish them and to make a political statement, which is now why she's, of course, being interviewed or being investigated by the AG, because she outright broke, it was illegal for her to charge them with a crime that wasn't illegal. So, but I think that that's a really great example of how far some of these left-leaning and extremist Democrats are willing to go to get this agenda across to keep their liberal base.
Right, and I think it's just, and I mean with the Libertarian Party and many, I call them cultural libertarians for the most part. I've never been more disappointed. I've never been more disappointed in them in my life, because this has turned into like the I can't even talk right now. This is like the prologue of the freaking Rwandan genocide. Like I don't say that in jest. I'm not trying to poke at it, but the vicious use of identity politics to divide people and to get rid of any nuance or gray space in it has gotten disgusting, because it's either you're gonna worship the cops or it's Black Lives Matter all the time. You're not allowed to look at things on a case by case basis, and I see that for a lot of libertarians. The gang culture, the mob culture, really pushed a lot of them who started putting up black squares and everything on their social media to do that, despite the fact that, for a lot of these people that I know that they don't actually believe that. But it's like, I posted somewhere recently that, rioting breaks the non-aggression principle. And I don't think I've ever had so many libertarians try and justify the destruction of property in my life. And my retort for that is, what about all the black-owned businesses? Their lives don't matter. What about, I think it's beautiful. We saw the return of the rooftop Koreans, and I think in Philadelphia we saw the storefront Sikhs. Like, this isn't
storefront Sikhs are
I want to be friends with them. I mean, it's gotten to a point where everyone's really starting to realize, like, this never had anything to do with the guns. The guns was never the problem. The problem was always the mechanism of control. And when we look around at the past 4 or 5 months, it's been nothing but liberal cities with the most massive gun control in the country that have been burning down.
Right. Well, and I live outside of Seattle.
Oh shit!
And 2.5 hours.
Did you go to Chaz?
I did not go to Chaz.
I hear it was very nice there.
I heard it was a beautiful place to visit. I'm disappointed that the country was dismantled. I heard it was a lovely place to visit in the summer, but I was a little conflicted with the they were handing out ARs out of the back of his whip, sitting down there, and I was like,
I've never felt so emotionally confused in my life watching that. It's like, wait a second. They have guns. They have their own cops. They have a strong border. They're checking people's IDs and stuff. It's like, what the hell? They wanted to topple the police state and just replace it with another police state.
Yeah, which was bitterly ironic. And for me, the whole gun issue was because I think, and watch your ultra conservatives come out on me on this one. Everybody gets a gun, right? I think it should be that, not necessarily out of the back of a car, but I do think that it should be that simple, right? You should be able to walk in, purchase your gun, and leave, because we know that there's never been a successful gun control law in America. And I say America because in the history of our world, we have seen what successful gun control can do to those dangerous levels, right? Germany and Russia and Venezuela, and so we know what it can do. So I like to keep it like that. But at the same time, I was like, these guys owning guns is probably like, can we just get somebody out there training them? At least for that. But I have said for years now, I resigned my membership to the Libertarian Party, and I did that when Borja went off the rail with his pedo. Trying to be... Oh,
that was weird. That's a throwback to like 1,000 years ago, it feels like.
Right. Yeah. So, and that was 2017. Yeah, right after it, because he was trying to jump the shark and stay relevant, right? So he went off the rails with that. And that I resigned my membership in the Libertarian Party at that point. And I stood very strong on the statement that, if libertarians would stop arguing over who's more libertarian on the internet, you might actually see them get some leverage. Because 4 years ago, how many very, 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 very few people knew that there was a third party, right? I mean, Green Party-esque, but they sure as hell, I can tell you that I met very few people, maybe 1% of voters, that knew there was a Libertarian Party. Well, the one thing that Gary Johnson, whether you love him or hate him or whatever, he became relevant enough and threatened the system enough that now everybody knows that there's a third party. And I told Nick Sarwark at the time, I'm like, you have a moment, right? Capitalize on this, market this. You guys have a moment. Instead, what they do, enter Borja with his pedo excusing bullshit. And I'm just like, are you like, really? And here we are, right? Now you got the ANCAPers, with the non-aggressive, like it's a shit show. And it's
Rest in
disappointing.
power, Chairman Sarwark. Rest in power. I So here's where I've come from, and this is where I've been trying to really lead a lot of the listeners of the show. I'm at the point now where I believe that to change things politically and just to focus on the political outcome is mostly a losing cause, especially when it comes to elections for third parties, because all the rules are written by the duopoly itself. So my biggest thing is I think if we want to actually change people to not just to vote libertarian, but to want to live a liberty-oriented lifestyle, it's got to come through culture. It's got to come through businesses. And I think, talking to a few of the gun store owners in my area, I'm just curious, how have things been business-wise since the pandemic started?
Well, I mean, we definitely can, I think that you are incredibly naive and ignorant if you do not see what's going on with that, right? I mean, with the gun stores and stuff. I mean, I got a message from a friend of mine that owns a gun store, and he says all the 1911s are gone and all the revolvers are gone. I'm like, what the hell do you mean? He goes, people are buying everything.
Who wants a revolver? Seriously, do those people are still around?
Yes. Oh God, yes.
What are they gonna do? Get in their trucks and pull out their 6-shooters? Really?
Hey man, I'm telling you, they're
more power to you. Again. More power to you.
I tell you what, when we're done today, get on Instagram and look up the hashtag Wheelgun Wednesday. Like it has become a total thing again.
I'm a Glock apologist, so I get
this interview's over. I gotta go.
Everything was so beautiful up until now.
It was. We had such a great relationship, and then you had to use the G word. I became an instructor recently, as I'd mentioned, and I bought a Glock, and because I'm a SIG girl, right? So here it comes, right? Because there's really the line too. Is typically you're it's kind of like was that line in Pulp Fiction? You could be a Beatles guy or an Elvis guy, and you like them both, but not equally. It's kind of like the same with SIG and Glock, although I think the separation is much bigger.
On a side note, I do shoot better with a SIG. It's just a better balanced
in your hand.
Yeah.
And you know what's super funny about that is a very dear friend of mine is one of the head instructors for Glock, the corporation. And a couple times I've been out at SHOT Show with him, I'm actually decent with a Glock in my hand. But I just, it's that classic, I don't care for the way they feel. But so that's always the joke. But for me, I don't think it's fair to only give people a firearm to try that I'm comfortable with, right? Because they may like a Glock and they may like the way it feels in their hand. And so that's not fair for me. But I will say this to all of you Glock people out there. Glocks are so awesome that you have to change every single part on them.
Okay,
Glocks are amazing. They're the best guns ever. But I'm going to change every single part on this Glock.
We'll let that one just kind of simmer there. But I will say that I live in Northern Virginia, and it's the blue speckle in the state that makes the rest of the state go blue. I've never seen so many of my liberal neighbors start stocking up as if the zombie apocalypse is coming. Yet these are all the same people that they go to the Everytown USA rallies. They like Bloomberg. They vote for all the all the gun control to do everything under the sun. They vote. They never care. And now that some of the crime, some of the other stuff is reaching the suburbs, and then when they couldn't get their toilet paper and shit, now they're prepping for doomsday.
Right. And and I'm glad you brought that back around, because this is something that I think that the gun control argument isn't dead. And a lot of people have been saying this. And one of them is a couple of very dear friends of mine in the industry that have made huge changes in the industry with the legally and fighting for years. But here's the thing. I think it's going to fall on us and I use this term loosely, to a community, whatever that means, right? Because these people are they're more often than not their own worst enemy. But the industry and gun people will say that it's really up to us right now to seize this moment to do as much outreach as humanly possible to get people comfortable with guns, to get people to understand, more importantly, to get people to understand that if you have, like when I went to Detroit and did this whole thing where we trained almost 2,000 women in 2 days to use a gun. It was an amazing experience. I did some briefings and I said, look, ladies, you have all made the decision to come here and have chosen to make using a firearm for self-defense, exercising that right. And I don't care, all of you here, different politics and nationalities and religions and ethnicities. And the one thing that brought you together was your right of self-defense. You are now an advocate for the Second Amendment, whether you realize that you are or not. And if you go back and vote not for gun control laws, you're going to hit yourself, metaphorically hit yourself in the kneecap. But more importantly, what you need to understand is that you may realize that consciously. But if you turn around and you vote for a politician that supports those laws, you might as well be voting for the law itself. And so you saw a lot of like, oh, okay. And I said, you may like, we were in Detroit. So I said, you may like Gretchen Whitmer, right? You may like what she's doing. But does she support a law that could potentially limit how you choose to defend yourself? And you can kind of see them sit back. So not only do we need to be doing outreach, I feel, and education about that, but also just, hey, we need to get them knowing how to be comfortable with this firearm. We don't want them to be afraid of them, because when the election's over, right, and the cure for COVID comes on November 4th, we're going to, right, you're going to end up seeing a lot of people that aren't going to feel threatened anymore, but they never did anything with that firearm. And because of that, they're going to turn around and send it they're going to try to sell it. They're going to try to put it, get it into a gun or a pawn shop or whatever. And then they're going to go right back to voting for the very laws that they realize were there to protect them. And so I think that we really are being, I say this respectfully to those who disagree with me, because it's not specific toward them, but I think as a whole, the industry / community is being kind of short-sighted about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid to say it, but like, I'm not a fan of the NRA at all. And for me, what really showed me the true intentions of the NRA was the Philando Castile shooting in 2016. When Philando Castile, a legal gun owner, was shot by a cop, and he legally possessed a firearm. He was a legal concealed carry permit owner, and the NRA was just completely silent about him. And during
would
this,
they have been if he was white?
Oh, he would have been on a commercial.
Right.
They would have been running him for office. He would have been speaking at all the conventions and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just one of these opportunities where, National Association for Gun Rights has been talking about it. Gun Owners of America has been talking about it. Maj Toure from Black Guns Matter has been talking about it. When it comes to what I feel like the corporate gun industry, they've been making all the money from this, rightfully so. I mean, they're selling what people need right now, but at the same time, they're completely silent on it, especially when it comes to I just think it's hilarious when you see these people just wearing black clothing, marching up on Stony Mountain, Georgia, and other places with their weapons. It's like, I think that's as American as fuck right there.
Absolutely,
like, that's so beautiful. And depending on what shows that I go on for panels and stuff, they usually stick me in like the right leaning or the left leaning seat. And when this one communist, and I'm not saying that to insult her. She loves being called a communist. She's a self-identified communist. She was like, well, these black communities are terrified of white nationalists going in and setting things on fire. And Antifa's not doing it. It's a white nationalist. They came to me. They're like, Remso, what do you think? I'm like, I think they have every right to own a gun. And if someone's going to harm them or their community, they have a right to use their gun. I mean, I go as far back to say, like, listen, when you look at a lot of gun control we're dealing with now, it was targeted at the Black Panthers. I think the Black Panthers had every right in the world to march down a street with their rifles.
That's right. Yeah, we're looking at you, Reagan.
Yeah, I mean, it comes into those uncomfortable moments where it's not a left-right issue. It's not a Dem versus Republican issue. It's a you versus the state issue. And that's all this is coming down to.
And you're 100% correct. And it's funny because I think that, and I'm going to say it too. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I think that the right leaning, conservatives are incredibly guilty of the hypocrisy on that. Right? It is, the right to bear arms. Everybody needs to own a gun. Oh, whoa, wait.
Not those people.
Yeah. And why are they, it isn't okay for them to be marching on, they shouldn't be, storming the Capitol or Stone Mountain or any of that stuff. I'm like, you realize that I went off on this with the Kyle Rittenhouse thing because this was a great example of how people don't understand policy and the Constitution. And I was like, no. The people that you worship, right, our founding fathers and our Continental Army, were literally those people, right? You get that, right? Like those were the people that created the country that you get to sit here and talk out of your ass. So, and had we lost the war, what would they have been, right? They would have been treasonous traitors and hung, and right? So it just happened to be we won. So I think that it's frustrating to see that kind of that double standard on that. And I take a lot of heat for that in the industry, because I have zero fear calling that out. And because I understand there's more to the Constitution than shall not be infringed. And I love it. Yeah, I was very much like, yes, these guys. I was all excited.
They're arguing with our points for us in a way that they will never be able to take back.
Correct. And it's eaten. I think when it really comes down to it, right, the psychology of it, Remso, is that these people, right, the conservative side, they're like, oh shit, they're using our arguments against us, kind of, right? And it's like, I on a subconscious level, and I think that whenever that happens, right, it kind of pisses people off when your own shit's thrown in your face, and now you don't know how to handle that. So what do? We just need to get rid of it, And so I think it's funny listening to them throw out those double standards.
Have you encountered over the last couple months, this situation where you've dealt with somebody who's incredibly pro-gun control, just completely anti-gun, have a complete flip on their stances? Like, as in, nobody should ever own guns, or I mean, just in that camp of, oh, why do you own a gun? Oh, what do you think is going to happen? Why do you own one? Oh, nothing's going to happen to you. It's those people. Those are the ones who I think that's the biggest indicator of a cultural change. And I do believe that, and I think the gun argument, springs out into many other things. I at least know in my district right now, my congressional district, I believe down to my core, you've got a lot of people of Joe Biden and, Biden-Harris signs in their front yard that are going to go out and vote for Trump secretly. Because they see what's going on, and they're like, I don't want this happening to me. Now it's affecting me, therefore it can't happen.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think that, or they're just not, 4 years ago they put out signs, and this year they're not putting them out, right? I mean, I think I think you're right. I do think that some of that is happening. I can't say, I get a lot of the, you do have a right to own a gun, but you don't need ... right? That's a lot of the stuff I get. I did just have a lady recently come in, because I own a day spa, and she says, I just don't understand why women think they need to own guns. And I looked at her and I said, you know what? Good for you. Good for you that you have lived such a blessed life that you have never been in a position to feel the need to have to defend your life and protect yourself. Good for you.
If you don't mind,
bless your heart.
If you don't mind me asking, I mean, we don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but you're a domestic violence survivor, right?
I am. Yeah, I am. So I'm very vocal about that. It's okay. You can ask. I was beaten and sexually assaulted, and there's a lot of voices out there for the sexual assault kind of thing. So I just kind of leave that to the side. But I was never anti-gun. I've always been. I didn't own them at that time, but I was pro-gun. And I'm pro-Constitution, right? I'm an absolutionist, right? I don't even like constitutional conservative. Wrong. If you're either constitutionalist or you're a conservative, right? They're mutually exclusive, because our founding fathers were rebels. So I was never anti-gun. But 2 years ago here in Washington State, they passed that law, 1639, and most people in the country know about it. And there was a lot of components to it, but the short of it is that what threw me into gun rights is there's a component of it that now when you sign that 4473, and for those of you that are listening that may not know what that is, although I'd be surprised listening to Remso show if you don't, but the 4473, for those of you that aren't familiar with that, is that magic form that that gun grabbers think doesn't exist, right? And they keep trying to push universal background checks. That already exists, and it goes through the FBI. Well, in Washington State, that form, the minute that you put your signature on it, you are now waiving your HIPAA rights. And they get to check your medical record and your mental health record and so on and so forth. Well, as a domestic violence survivor, I did what I was supposed to do all those years ago, and I went through mental health therapy. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and did everything that I need to do to become healthy again. But that being said, what is one of the biggest buzzes for gun control and red flags, right? PTSD.
Right.
So in this bill, it's the way, and this is what people don't understand about policy, right? It's not how it's written, it's how it's not written that usually, but opens up the door for crap that bites people on the ass. So this law, this is what it does. And it says that the health authority, whoever they are, this committee, that whoever that is, because that's not even been identified, they will get to review your mental health record and decide whether or not you should be able to purchase a firearm. So there's no limit on how far back they can look. It opens it up for them to be able to check your record every single year if they want. They can keep revisiting it. There's, I've got friends that have to take double mastectomy patients that have had to have all of their, female stuff removed. And some of the medicines that they have to take are classified in the antidepressant category.
How many Americans alone are taking some type of antidepressant like Lexapro? I think it's like 6 in 10 or something like that. It's a ridiculous number.
I would argue it's even higher than that. And here's the other piece of it, right? So what smoking cessation, sleeping medications, right? Mm-hmm. All of the other stuff that's out there, a lot of those are classified as antidepressants. So it's, so now what if I have started learning how to do even to a higher level. I've always been into it, but herbal remedies and learning like valerian is actually a Western medicine approved way to reduce stress so you can sleep so that I don't have to go take Ambien because I'm afraid of having, any sort of, indication that I have Ambien on my medical record now because they can deny me a firearm. And here's the kicker. And this is what the bigger picture of it, right? So now because of how it's written, they have the potential to look at my record every year. Well, guess what that opens up? Red flag laws. So now I'm right. And we have those here. So now not only can I, be denied the purchase of a firearm, if you think for a minute that they're not going to put me on some list to watch me to red flag me for what I already own, of course they are, so that's what threw me into this advocacy as a survivor, because a lot of survivors, red flag laws and these types of laws are dangerous for them because these laws can be used against domestic violence survivors and limit their ability to choose how they defend themselves. I
mean, it even becomes more nefarious. I used to do a show with Eric Pratt called Firing Back. And yeah. I mean, it was one of these things where, it always comes down to, the mechanism of violence, which is the state. Right. It's the greatest monopoly of violence in mankind. Yeah. And, they could go ahead and, what you said about the law is, it's not always about what's written, but it's about what's not written. That's the dangerous part about it. Yeah. It's like when, we were talking about state constitutions earlier. People, I don't think a lot of Americans really know this, but like in the state of New Jersey, there's nothing equivalent to like a Second Amendment in New Jersey. So what they don't have written down allows them a lot of leeway and a lot of control when it comes to restricting and regulating any type of firearm purchase. But, more nefariously when it comes to mental health and stuff like that, who gets to deem that? I mean, right. we have doctors, people that actually are have their license and everything, who are going on CNN saying, "Oh yeah, this person who I've never sat down with and examined. This person's obviously schizophrenic, paranoid, psychopath, and all this other stuff." It's like that's medical malpractice right there. You
100%. Yeah, it's louder for the people in the back, Remso.
Yeah, I mean,
it just Spanish too.
it just gets to this point where it's just like I think a lot of good is going to come out of this year. I think a lot of good is going to come out of it. I think everything has been really shitty, but I think a lot of good is going to come out of it. And regardless as to what people say about Trump, and I mean, I tell people I don't care who's going to be president. I need to go ahead and maximize freedom in my own life. But I think the one good I think the one good thing about Trump is that he's making everybody question these institutions and why these people have so much power.
Yeah,
I love him or hate him. I think that's the one positive thing that comes out of it.
I think that, so on that note, I just have to add this as we're kind of talking about him again, because it cracks me up, right? I read his books years and years and years ago, long before there was even a remote, chance of him being, involved in politics and, at this level and stuff. I mean, I'm talking like 16 years ago. And I read The Art of the Deal, and I've read a couple of his other books. And this is what he does best, right? Is he triggers people. And he's been like this forever. Like, this is the thing. He's such an asshole. Yeah, but you used to watch his show. No, I didn't. I'm like, don't lie. Like, everybody loved him.
Everybody watched The Apprentice.
Yeah, and everybody loved him because he was the asshole, right? So miss me with that crap, you guys. That's what made, I didn't like him. Then liar, whatever. But the thing is that but I think he's to the point now where he is so done. And he may just be this confident that he's going to win too. But like his level of zero shits given is just off the chart. And I think it's absolutely hilarious. Like some of the stuff that he says and some of the things that he's tweeting out and calling people out. And I think it's fantastic. I love this beautiful, lovely young lady that he has as his press secretary, who is just savage as all get out.
Oh, she gives no fucks. No fucks.
Glorious.
Where was she from day one?
Oh, she's glorious. I think that she's just that minute. My first, I didn't, I don't pay too much attention to federal politics because I understand where I'm most affected is in my state. And I mean, I keep my eye on it, but I really try to focus my activities either in my state or helping people in their states. But my first experience with her was when she popped up on stage and she just spanked Acosta's pee-pee verbally. And then she looked around and it was about the Flynn case. And she's like, and how come you're not asking this and this and this? And she slams her book shut and she goes, I'll give you the weekend to do your homework and we'll talk Monday. Now that's me, right? That's how I am, especially with men that act like that. And I was like, I'm in love.
Oh, yeah.
And she knows her stuff. And that's what's, Huckabee was great, right? And she was good, but I don't think that she had the experience that maybe that litigation experience or whatever that McNanny, I think is how you say it, that she's got to just brutalize these people, and I think it's super funny.
For me, I have a background in journalism, and I worked for a newspaper. And there's this like beltway elitism that puts journalists and reporters in like this pedestal where it's like they have to be the untamed free thinker for the rest of us. And how dare you ever question the institution of the press? I think it always, for me at least, it always came down to decent respect. If you're gonna act like a dick, and you have a track record for being a dick, expect to be treated as such. I think if Trump, and here's what people forget about, like he was friends with all these people. All these people loved him like a decade ago. Now it's that he's Orange Hitler and everything. But like if they treated him with respect, he's nice to Bret Baier. Bret Baier, there's a difference. I think Bret Baier is probably my favorite person in media, probably my opinion. But like Bret Baier has done things that have been both in terms of his reporting pro-Trump and anti-Trump. But Trump always treats him with respect. Why? Because Bret Baier is a professional. No one can look at Jim Acosta, who published a fucking book about how this is the worst administration in history, and then say, oh yeah, that guy's an objective reporter. How dare you speak down to Jim Acosta? It's like she has every right to backhand you verbally.
Yeah, she does, because you've literally set I agree. I absolutely agree. And you've set yourself, you deserve it. You absolutely deserve it. And I think that we're really seeing them go off the rail now over, this SCOTUS pick, right? This ACB. I call her the notorious ACB.
Take the crown back, Amy. Take the crown.
That's right. Take it back. So, I am pro-choice. I'm anti-abortion and pro-choice. You should watch people's heads spin when they try to figure that out. But, it's like I said, I mentioned this on Twitter last night. I'm like, spoiler alert, kids. Like it's like I said this with Kavanaugh. She just doesn't walk into some library, pull a book off the wall and burn the book about abortion and ban. That's not how it works, right? Yeah. The chances of that actually getting banned are slim to none. And, but I love where she stands on her gun rights. But these people are unhinged. And to watch this party, right? These alt-left liberals, I should say, instead of party, because there are some more centrist and rational Democrats out there. But to see them go after her for her being a mother now, and is she capable of doing this job? You know what? Fuck you.
This used to be basic shit. Like, we're attacking people for the most mundane shit. Like, I equate everything in 2012. It's like, you people attacked Mitt Romney because he was just the most Mayo person to ever run for president. Yet, you allow all this other bullshit from people. Like Joe Biden is literally, he has to be on drugs. And nobody fucking talks about it.
Oh, he's got dementia.
Yet they point out, with Bear, it's like, oh, she goes to church. Well, guess what? Contrary to popular belief, still a majority of Americans do that. Whether they're great at it, who fucking knows? But
Obama goes to church.
Yeah, like, we're attacking people for the most basic shit. It's like, oh, she breathes air. Who used to also breathe air? Hitler. It's like, this is they're grasping it so much. And I think they lost all credibility with Kavanaugh, and I did not like Kavanaugh. I wanted Barrett to be the pick last time. I think that Kavanaugh's a gun grabber. He said so as much himself during the Bush years. I think he was a bad pick. But what's funny, and this kind of loops everything together, like with the McCloskeys, like they were liberal Democrats, and now they were speaking at the RNC. The left turned Kavanaugh into a more conservative judge because of the way they treated him.
Yeah, and I don't. My concern with Kavanaugh wasn't so much the Second Amendment. That didn't bother. I wasn't as worried about him getting to that.
He was bad on the Fourth Amendment. He was bad on the Fifth Amendment. He was bad on a lot of things.
I'm like, this MFer will straight up spy on y'all, right? My bigger concern with him is that he was pro-Patriot Act. And that was a huge, right, which is a gateway to all.
That's a big disqualifier for me. If you defended that then and you still defend it, we can't be friends.
Yeah, for real. And that's like the TAPS Act, right? And I've actually been, I've had Dan Crenshaw come at me in my DMs on Instagram when I've gone after him for supporting the TAPS Act, and he's like, it isn't a gun control law, and I said, Dan, I'm not an idiot. I know it's not a gun control law, but I know it opens the door for gun control.
It's called unintended consequences.
Or I disagree. I think I think it is intended.
Oh, there you go.
I think it falls into that. It's not what it says, what it doesn't say.
What doesn't say. Okay, I see where you're going. Okay.
Yeah, I've been interviewed about the TAPS Act a few times. I understand the TAPS Act very, very well. And I understand exactly what it says. And I love to watch people try to come at me about it. Even Dan Cram, I'm like, no, miss me with your bullshit, because I know what that thing says. I've got it printed somewhere around. And we refer back to it to make sure that I stay savvy to it. Now, it's been backburnered. A lot of people don't realize this because they voted to renew, and I'm using super layman terms with this, people, but to renew the Patriot Act, right? We've got Patriot Act updated version, right? The alpha version from the beta version or whatever. But
the USA Freedom.
Yeah, they did.
I remember that. Yeah,
but the TAPS Act is basically the 3.0 version of the Patriot Act. So don't think for a minute that they're not that has gone away in any capacity. And so my issue with Kavanaugh was much bigger than that. That being said, to watch what they did, and then when it really sent me over the edge, like I was in the mild annoyance phase, but I got really pissed off when the USA Today paper went as far as saying that you need to make sure that you keep your children away from him, because alluding that he was a child molester because his
my brother. Yeah, my
basketball team thing.
Yeah, my brother was a George Mason University student during the Kavanaugh hearings. And I remember him coming home from school saying how professors were sending out emails to students saying how we're going to fight to make sure this is a safe campus. We're going to fight to make sure that, women are protected and all this other shit. It's like, are you freaking serious? He's the most, we could hate him on policy. And I say the same thing about Dan Crenshaw. I bet Dan Crenshaw is an amazing human being. Thank you for your service. You could still be a shitty politician. Right. You could still be a bad arbiter of the law.
Yeah, I agree. The only person that I have any respect and hope for, in fact, I told him this, I had the privilege of having dinner with him one night, is Thomas Massey. And I said, you're like the Obi-Wan of congressmen right now. You're our only hope, especially for the Second Amendment, right? Because he's the only one that's like, he's just kind of keeping it there. You know what I mean? And very on the level, because he's not there to get rich. He could care less about that. He just wants to go live with his cows on it, and his grass-fed cows on his farm, right? That's what drives him. That's what his passion is. So I love watching him. And right now I'm like, just don't get, I told him, I said, sir, don't get Hillaried. And he lost it, right? He lost it laughing because he doesn't care. And he calls out both sides. And that's what I appreciate about him, was that, I loved after his interview, because he basically called Pelosi out and made people come in and vote on that stimulus bill, which he hated anyway. He didn't even support the stimulus bill, and was very vocal about his vote, and didn't want to hide it. And you remember all this. And I don't want liberty. I don't want the republic to die in an empty chamber. That was such a great statement. And at the end of it, Trump was like, well, you're a third-rate politician. And that interview he did afterward, where he says, well, I'm at least second-rate.
Second-rate at best.
Oh, my God. It was awesome. It was awesome. And then he put that in his Twitter profile for a while, which I thought was even funnier. But, that's kind of what we need. And I don't think that this Barrett thing, I think somebody mentioned the other day in some banter with me that, well, she only has 4 years legislating from the, or legislating, I shouldn't say that. She has 4 years from the bench and 20 years academic. She doesn't have enough experience to be on the SCOTUS. And I said, well, first of all, you don't know what the Constitution says, and it shows. Because I can be nominated for SCOTUS. You can be, right? You don't have to be an attorney or have any experience, first of all. Second, the fact that she's got more constitutional academia experience, I would much rather have somebody on that panel of SCOTUS with that than bench experience, right? Because bench experience makes you political.
I think, and I think we're gonna have to wrap things up on this. Tell me what you think of this. I don't think Americans actually give a shit about whether someone has experience or not. And this goes for both the left and the right. Because if the left cared about experience, Kennedy wouldn't be president, Clinton wouldn't be president, Obama certainly wouldn't be president, AOC wouldn't be a congresswoman, and certainly for the right, Trump wouldn't be president.
Right. No, I agree. I absolutely agree, because typically when they start voting in that capacity, it's the lack of experience, which people equate experience to corruption, right? Looking at you, Joe Biden. And your 40 years of nothing and paying all that.
Well, he said 180 years. Just
180 years.
180 years.
That's right. For the 180 years that you've been in Congress and all of those millions you're paying in taxes, that's why people voted for people like Trump, right? They wanted that change. They didn't want a politician. So ironically, I think it's actually to the advantage of people to not have political experience.
Truth. Well, Kerry, I've had a blast. We've covered a lot. If people want to go ahead and connect with you, track all the misadventures that's going on with you, how can they do so?
Thank you very much. Well, that's a good way of putting it. Definitely infamous, not famous, right? You can find me on Instagram is probably my most active platform. If you want just my business and what I do with my activism with women's rights of self-defense, that's We the Female _official. You can find me everywhere else at We the Female, and just my political shit talking and shit posting and schooling. And I do a lot of education on real feminism, not feminazism, and constitutional stuff. And that's at Stilettos and Shotguns, all one word. And you can find that across all the platforms as well.
I've got to be honest. I do truly mean this. You're like one of my top 3 favorite Twitter accounts to follow. When I'm feeling down, I just go ahead and read one of your tweets. I'm like, oh, she just fucking destroyed that person. My life feels so much better.
That means a lot coming from you, because I'm not a big Twitter user. And honestly, I don't use Twitter because when I screenshot it to post on Instagram, it looks cool.
I totally hear. Well, we got to hook you up on Parler. We got to get you hooked up. You are on Parler. I will include the links for everything.
I love it. I would love to be more active on Parler. I will say I hope that they update the platform. It's a little confusing, but I know it's new, right? And it's going to get it's bearing.
I'm your inside hookup. I'll help you out.
Awesome.
We'll be good. Well, Kerry, thank you so much, folks. Thank you. And remember, this costs you nothing, but it means everything to me. A 5-star rating and review on iTunes goes a long way. If you appreciate conversations with Kerry, who's an absolute riot, and all my other guests and all the other topics, that costs you maybe like 5 seconds, and it means everything to me. As always, you're listening to On the Run. I'm Remso W. Martinez. Good night.
Check out our other shows and more from the We Are Libertarians Network at wearelibertarians.com.